In this interview, we'll talk about the invisible disability of multiple sclerosis and living and coping with MS symptoms. I'm Jenda Tracy from Women Thriving with MS, and this series is Leading Change for MS, featuring people who share their insights and expertise on how to manage multiple sclerosis and improve health and well-being from the inside out. If you are new to this channel, be sure to subscribe below and check out the links after the interview. Now, I'm really excited today to introduce our guest. Jessie Ace is the founder and CEO of Disabled to Enabled, which helps inspire people living with chronic illnesses so that they can live their best lives. She does this through podcasting, writing articles, and illustrating. She also educates people on the power that patients have when they share their stories. Welcome, Jessie. It's so great to have you here today on this interview.
Hey, Jen, it's great to be here.
So you have a very interesting story, and I'd like to start with the part before you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Tell us what was happening in your life.
Yeah, so I was at university at the time. I think you call it college over there. And I was basically studying to finish this design crafts degree. I was in my third year. I was working like tremendously hard, so many hours in a day. I really shouldn't have been. I decided also that it was a good idea to set up a business in my second year, an illustration business, so that I would have a job to move into when I left university. That wasn't the best idea in the end, because actually that kind of led me to what happened on the last day of university, which was I woke up with a completely paralyzed left side.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really weird. It came completely out of the blue. Like I wasn't really experiencing symptoms that I recognized leading up to that. I mean, I was exhausted, true, because I was working like crazy hours every day.
Yeah, and just to ask about that out of curiosity, because there's some resonance with me, and I was working a lot when I got diagnosed too, crazy hours, and I felt that fatigue. How many hours were you working a day? I just want to get a sense. Maybe the people listening or watching this video will be like, wow, that happened to me too, right?
Yeah, so I mean, my course anyway was like 9 till 5. Okay, which is longer than most courses. Most courses, you just go in for an hour for a lecture and then that's it, that you're done. We were expected to be in our workshops between 9 and 5. But most of us towards the end of the third year, we were actually coming in at like 7, 8 in the morning and then not leaving till about 6, 7 at night. Basically when we got kicked out. That's the only reason we left. And then before and after that, I would be going home and I would be like negotiating contracts, and I would be, sending out emails. I'd be updating my social media profile. I'd be, sending out samples. I'd be working on illustrations and things for people. So it was so full on all day, every day. I mean, I really don't know how I did it looking back on that.
So then there you were, and you said you didn't even notice that you didn't have any indication about the MS leading up to that.
No, exactly. Like I said, I was exhausted anyway. I wasn't really noticing. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Like, I don't know. It's one thing that MS has definitely taught me, is to pay attention to your body. I think it is one of those things that we all kind of take for granted at some point. And at the time, I wasn't eating well. I was working too much. I wasn't looking after myself in the slightest, if I'm quite honest. That may have contributed to it a fair amount, looking back at it. But the thing was that I had no idea about what MS even was. I had no family members that I knew of at that time with any kind of illnesses, So yeah, I didn't even think twice about it.
Like a tsunami when it happened.
Yeah, and literally all in one go. And then, like after waking up with this paralyzed left side and me being me, I was like, oh, I'll be fine. It'll come back. It'll come back on its own. I've just worked too much. It's fine. It's probably a pinched nerve or something. And I know that's something that a lot of MS people kind of say is like, oh, it's probably just a trapped nerve. And we put it down to these kind of simpler kind of things because it's easier to kind of comprehend in our own minds. But me being me, I waited a week to go to the doctor about it and actually get it checked out. And she basically said, at first she was pretty much like, I'm pretty sure it's a hemiplegic migraine and all of this sort of stuff. Now, I'd never had a migraine, so I didn't really know what that was, and I certainly didn't know what a hemiplegic migraine was. She's told me that it was a local area, an area of localized weakness in the body. So I thought, okay, that makes sense, right? That's fine. I was 22 years old at this time. So walking back home from the doctors, finally got home, and she rang me back and she said, I've just been speaking to a colleague, and my colleague actually said that you could have had a stroke and I really should have sent you to A&E. So I'm gonna leave you a letter in reception, like come and pick it up and then take it to A&E, and they just want to do some tests and stuff. That's fine. And I thought, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like I was working hard, but I didn't think I was working that hard, So I went and picked up this letter that they'd left in reception for me, took it over to A&E, or the ER as you guys call it in America. And obviously it was full of people, and we were there for hours and hours and hours, as you expect to in A&E. And they admitted me onto a stroke ward, basically. So I was this little tiny 22-year-old who didn't look after herself, who was like skin and bone pretty much, because I didn't eat anything. And I was put into the stroke ward surrounded by these like 70, 80-year-old ladies, all I think had dementia or Alzheimer's or something. They were all shouting and trying to get out of their beds, and there was nurses like trying to push them back in their beds, and it was chaos. It was absolute chaos.
That must have totally freaked you out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, totally.
Like that's scary, like to go into this environment and just like, oh my God, like number one, I don't fit in here, but secondly, what the heck is that going to lead to in my own life?
Exactly. Yeah, I've never felt so vulnerable in that moment as I have done forever. Like I've never been in hospital only ever to visit someone, like I've never been in there because I've been ill or anything like that. So it was a complete shock, and I had no idea what was going on in my own mind. And I know this is going to sound really weird, but in my own mind I was kind of perfectly healthy and well. Like there was nothing wrong with me. I had a paralyzed left side, but to me I was like, oh no, it's fine, like I'm just going to carry on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's that invincibility and the denial that we have. I mean, looking back now, when you think about that and you analyze it, how do you evaluate that now in the present moment?
I mean, looking back, I wouldn't say that there was anything that I would have changed per se, because I think that experience really was my wake-up call in a lot of ways. I mean, I've never been in that situation before. I didn't really know what to make of it. I didn't really know what was going on. And I think actually in some ways it provided me with comfort, which I know sounds bizarre, but it was because I was the only one on that ward that could actually take herself to the loo, and I could like look after myself, and I could go and like dress myself and things, whereas nobody else on the ward could. And I kind of saw that weirdly as a kind of advantage over everybody else. I'm like, well, I can't be that bad because I can still do this.
So some reassurance in a way that came up for you. And so what happened after that?
So I was in there for about 3 days, and on the third day, and I remember so clearly, I was eating apple pie with custard at the time. Now, if you've never experienced apple pie and custard, I seriously recommend it because it's like my favourite thing in the world. And I remember looking over to the nurse's station that was like on the other side of the ward, and my neurologist guy was there that I'd seen like the day before. And he was kind of looking at his clipboard and he was writing something down and stuff. And I saw him mouth to a nurse that he was kind of with. I saw him mouth the words like, I'll go and talk to her when she's finished, kind of thing. And it was like really, really clear, like how he moved his mouth. And I could tell that's what he said. And automatically I just went, oh my God, oh my God, this is it. This is it. I'm going to find out what it is. And like, if it's something terrible, it could be like a brain tumor or something. Like your mind goes a little bit stir crazy at that kind of time, doesn't it? Yeah, he came over and he pulled the curtain around my bed and he sat on the end of it. He looked at me straight in the eye and he said, look, Jessie, I'm really sorry, but I think we want to do one more test to confirm it for sure. But I think what you've got is something called multiple sclerosis. And I just looked at him for a second and I just went, oh, okay. And he was like, do you know what that is? And I was like, no idea whatsoever. What the heck is that? And then automatically my mind started filling with pictures of wheelchairs and like, not being able to run after my future kids in the park or anything like that. Bear in mind I was a 22-year-old girl at the time. I'd had like a long-term serious boyfriend, and I was like, how is that going to affect us as a relationship? We wanted to get married and stuff. What if I can't walk down the aisle? And in this, like, it must have been only like 5 seconds, but it felt like such a long time. And my eyes started to fill with tears, and I was like, no, I'm not letting this out. I'm not letting anybody see this vulnerability, because that's kind of the person that I was at that time. I didn't let anybody like see who I kind of really was. I was kind of always presenting, you know, a more kind of confident front to people and all of that sort of stuff.
So that just, you were in that slow motion place of it all coming in, and then you at first allowed the vulnerability and then you shut it down.
Yeah.
And then when you shut that down, what happened next?
Well, it was crazy because so he mentioned having to do this one more test, and I now know that to be a lumbar puncture. I don't know if you've ever had a lumbar puncture. Have you ever had a lumbar puncture?
Yes, you know, all of what you're saying sounds so familiar to me.
Yeah.
When I had the lumbar puncture, I asked the neurologist, have you done lumbar punctures before? And he's like, oh yeah, 25 years, but I'm too busy to do it.
Oh.
And I was like, great. And so I refused. And what happened is he came back to me through another doctor who was, you know, a student doctor. And he said, you know, the neurologist will do it, but he's got to have like students there to watch. And I thought, bring them on. Like, if you want to fill the room with 30 students so I can have a lumbar puncture from a guy who's been doing it for 25 years, you know, bring it on. So, but no one looks forward to a lumbar puncture. And how did that land with you to have one?
Well, I had a student do mine, so I was like, oh, okay, are you sure you know what you're doing? Like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Right, okay. And then they get all the forms out, don't they? And you have to sign all these forms away to say, like, we're not liable if we accidentally like knock something and cut off, you know, feeling to your leg or whatever. I'm like, great, okay. So I couldn't actually get worked up about that because my boyfriend's mom had actually just come to visit me. She literally turned up as this medic student was like prepping me for this lumbar puncture, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Perfect timing.
Oh, yeah. If there was a worse time, seriously. So she just randomly turned up, and I was like, oh, hi. And she was like, oh yeah, you know, Paul's dad's kind of parking the car kind of thing. So I thought I'd come up and just say hello, I see how you are. And I was just like, oh, and you know, when you're in that kind of really vulnerable sort of state, and it just takes that one word, and you just like, oh, okay. And you really got to hold it back. Yeah. It was very much like that. And trying to do this lumbar puncture was horrendous, if I'm honest. One point it was quite funny actually, because my boyfriend's mom was just like there, like just like there. You know, you have to like lie flat kind of thing.
No space. No space.
No. No, so she was kind of there. They kind of caught something in my back. Now, I don't know if this is like a normal thing to happen, but when they caught this thing in my back, it kind of felt like a puppet on a string kind of thing. And I felt, oh, this is such a weird thing to explain, but like I kind of felt like everything was being pulled up through my leg, and my leg kind of just flicked out like a complete autonomous reaction, kind of nearly kicked my boyfriend's mum in the face. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. So yeah, all of this craziness was happening, and it was just the most chaotic 3 days I think I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. Did they put you on steroids after that? Did you go on a steroid drip?
No, I didn't get the option for that. I didn't get told about that. I thought I'd literally just have to ride it out. And people have told me about steroids and things, and I was like, oh, why didn't I get that, you know?
Yeah, interesting.
So it took about 6 months all in all for my left side to come back completely. And after I left hospital, a few weeks after that, I actually lost my right hand as well. So I had 2 hands that were not functioning.
Let's pause there for a sec, because
yes.
I think this is a very pivotal, people maybe don't understand what that means to you. You're about to graduate from school, and you had all these opportunities in front of you.
I was studying something called design crafts, which is basically how you learn to do like glass blowing and metalwork and ceramics and all of that really sort of hands-on kind of stuff. And I actually realized that because I kind of majored in the textile side of it and surface pattern design and that sort of thing. So I actually decided towards the end of my second year that I would have actually preferred to do illustration. Which, you know, as it happens. So I decided to set up an illustration business, which obviously requires like the use of your hand, and you have to draw, and you have to you have to kind of count on those hand muscles. So by the end of the university, I had work stocked in like stores all over the country. I had a contract for a children's book that was ready to go. literally just had to leave university to start that. And I also had my agent as well that was wanting to represent me at trade shows kind of around the world. And
so you were at that place where you were coming out of school and you had your whole life ahead of you with these opportunities, and you'd worked so hard, and obviously I'm going to assume that you're very gifted to have this in front of you, and there you are at home with two hands that don't work, recovering for 6 months.
Yeah, and me being the person that I was trying to illustrate this children's book in the hospital when I was getting my diagnosis, because you
don't want to waste any time. Time's precious, right? You got to use every second of your time.
I thought that I was going to lose it, and I just I didn't want to tell anybody that was in the hospital. I didn't tell anybody that anything was wrong, and it took a long time for me to actually tell people about MS anyway, because it did take a long time to come to terms with. I mean, I was literally a perfectly healthy person for 22 years, and then all of a sudden people were calling me disabled and giving me booklets on disabled rights and things, and I was like, whoa, hang on a second, I haven't changed, my body's doing something really weird, but I haven't changed. And it just, I realize I'm going down a separate kind of topic down here.
Well, let's just take a moment to capture that, because I think people can relate that after a diagnosis like that, and the trauma, let's just say there is absolutely trauma that happens in this, in probably everybody's story that's diagnosed with MS in some way or another, that, there you were trying to finish your book so that you, just in case it was yanked from you, you could get it done. It was that important to you.
Yeah.
And that is, it's so hard. I'm impressed, actually, just as a person who's 54, and at the time you were 22 and I would have been 44 when I was diagnosed. It was 10 years ago, that you actually were in that place where you're like, I'm still the same person, because for me, the place I went to was, I'm now broken, right? So it's interesting how we can have different thoughts while we're going through this traumatic journey. And so there you were, and you had a period of 6 months that it took for your hands to heal?
Yes, my left side took about 6 months. My right hand was quite sporadic, actually. It was there for an hour, and then it disappeared for an hour, and then it came back for an hour, and then it disappeared for 2 days, and then it came back, and then it disappeared again. So,
and which hand are you left-handed or right-handed for your?
I'm right-handed.
So that was really the worst for you.
It really was the worst, because I'm like, look, if it's gone, then you can kind of deal with it, but when it's here and then it's gone and then it's here back again and it's gone again, and you're like, oh god, I don't know where I stand anymore, and I kind of thought that like you, I did kind of feel a little bit broken. I felt a little bit like I'd been tossed on the discard pile almost, because I kind of thought, whoa, everything has changed now, absolutely everything. And I think the most important thing that happened at that time was actually that I lost so much confidence in myself, because I didn't know who I was anymore, if that makes sense. So drawing was the only thing I ever knew. I remember being 4 years old, sitting around my grandma's kitchen table and her teaching me how to draw cats. That was kind of my life,
Absolutely. It's so true. And the way you express it is so beautiful, because there is that identity loss that happens. Who am I now is the question. I thought I'd never be able to work again and was at the peak of my career. And so for you, losing that, a fear, we should say, fear of losing that gift that was given to you and that has been part of your soul and being for your entire existence, really. So
taken away.
Taken away. So if we just fast forward a little bit, how did things evolve for you?
So one of the most imperative things I think that happened in hospital, which I at the time I didn't think anything of it. I thought that it was a normal piece of advice, just that everybody says. Turns out it's not. So my doctor, when he diagnosed me, he actually told me to go home and Google it to find out what it was for myself. So I didn't actually receive any information about what MS was. I didn't receive any leaflets or anything. I was literally just told, go home, Google it, find out what it is yourself. And, you know, you'll be seeing like an MS nurse in 4 months' time. Go and kind of bring your questions to her kind of thing.
And that's the gap in the healthcare system. It's such a big gap. And it's like, if there was some way that there could just be like right away put people into counseling and sort of education around it, it would just be, it wouldn't be fun, but it would be like such a supportive path. I think we leave the hospital with this chunk of time not knowing what will happen next, and it's terrifying.
It's terrifying. Yeah, it's awful. It really needs to be changed.
And be told that you're to go home and Google it when your hands are working. Like,
yeah.
It's like, oh my goodness, come on, dude, get your stuff together.
Yeah.
So there you were faced with that reality at that time of the intermittent right hand not working. So where did you go from there? What happened next for you to deal with this process and find your way? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so I mean, this was 6 years ago now, so we're quite, you know, further along than what we were. And when I was told to Google it, I've obviously found every negative story I could have possibly found, every scary symptom that I knew nothing about. And because I didn't know anything about MS, I actually thought that everybody's symptoms were the same. So when I was reading about people who have gone blind and people who have lost the use of the whole body, or people who have, you know, like not able to swallow or not able to do this or that, and I thought that was going to be me because I didn't know any different. And it was absolutely terrifying, if I'm quite honest.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and going into things like Facebook groups on social media and things, it was kind of just the most negative experience I think I've ever had. So yeah, that was ridiculously scary. So kind of at that point, I didn't feel like, because I didn't have any confidence in myself, I didn't feel like I was good enough to kind of run a business and things. So that just kind of went all out the window. Because I thought, you know, if my left side's gone, then my right side could quite easily go at any time as well. And, you know, I don't want to be taking on contracts and things if I can't fulfill them. And I had no confidence in the fact that I could fulfill that at that time. So yeah, all of it just had to go. I went and got a job in a comedy club. Didn't tell them that I had MS because why would I?
What were you doing in the comedy club, out of curiosity?
Just like cleaning floors, like data entry, that kind of thing. The kind of tasks that you don't really need hands for, but you kind of like, so like data entry, for example, it was more of a kind of this kind of thing. Like, didn't really matter.
Very different than illustration, right?
Yes.
Where you need to have more control.
Yeah. You don't need a lot of control for data entry. It's literally just like, even if you got a pen, you could just push it with a pen, so it's not an issue.
So let's fast forward beyond that point,
yeah,
and because I want to also share what you've been up to more recently. So let's kind of go to that pivotal place where there was a shift for you.
Yeah, sure. So a couple of years after that, I started to run a business again, mainly in like graphic design kind of things for weddings and things like that, because my partner was a wedding singer at the time, and I thought, oh, he gets to go to nice posh hotels, I want to do that too. So I designed all the wedding stationery and all that sort of stuff. We then had a business together, and that was the kind of pivotal moment, I think, because that's where we decided to kind of expand our marketing and stuff. I mean, you probably know this, like working in marketing. To expand our marketing, we decided to do a Facebook Live every day for a year, and you vastly run out of things to talk about. I'm going to say
that's a big commitment.
We didn't really realize how big of a commitment that was at the time, I'll be honest. So we got to know all these people online, and I very, very, very slightly, every so often, kind of dropped in a little bit of oh, my hand's not feeling great today, or whatever. And eventually I shared more and more of my story. And the thing that really amazed me was the fact that I got messages back from brides saying, oh my God, I've got an invisible illness. I don't know how I'm going to plan my wedding. Like, how can I disguise my oxygen tank into my dress? How can I decorate my wheelchair? How can I do this? And I'd never experienced that before. I had no idea that my story could have that impact on someone else. I thought, oh my gosh, that's great. I could help people. This is what it was. This is my purpose.
It's so interesting how things unfold, right? We never know in life what's going to happen next or where we're going to be led. And in a way that can be, there's a lot of fear living with MS about that's going to be something negative, but
Yeah.
there's also these amazing positive things that happen, these unfoldings in life that show up. And so there you were being vulnerable and sharing, and people, women, were responding to you, and you were meeting a need for them around something that had never been discussed. How powerful is that?
Oh, so powerful. And it really kind of made me reevaluate every single thing that I was doing. And that's where it kind of started with the whole advocacy sort of journey, because I thought, well, if other people are being told to Google what MS is and MS symptoms and things, then I want to make what they find a positive experience rather than the negative experience that I had. Which is why I started to reach out to like the National MS Society and try and start to kind of start sharing my story on those bigger sites and start sharing my experiences of what it was like to live with MS at like, how old would I have been back then, like 27, 28?
So interesting. You, when you were writing on the MS Society blog, was that something that you did for free at the time?
Interesting question. Very interesting question. And this is what I want to teach people as well. I found very quickly that most sites in the UK don't actually pay you. Okay, that's all a voluntary sort of thing. Charities in the US have a very different kind of approach to people sharing their stories, and they're much more of an encouraging kind of thing, and they encourage you to share your story in exchange for a financial reward, which personally I feel is a lot better, because I feel like you are creating an asset for their website, and I think you should be rewarded for that.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that. When you found that out, Jessie, what did you decide to do about it?
I actually decided to reach out to more charities. Now, I know that might sound a little bit backwards, because I knew that it would be on a voluntary basis. But the reason that I did it was because I wanted to build up a kind of a group, a kind of
like a
build
portfolio
up like
of work?
Portfolio, that's the word I was thinking of. I was trying to build up a portfolio of work that I've done and results that I've got for the charities and companies and things like that, so that I could reach out to these others that actually do like pay and things like that.
What I like about what you're sharing here, which I think is really important, is you were in it for the long-term game. You weren't trying to get a little bit of money here and there. It's like you had a vision and a plan within your new abilities of what you could do. It's a great story, because I think that a lot of people, when they lose their identity and go through that trauma and grief, and they come out on the other side, which can take 3 to 4 years in general to do that, it's nice to know that, you know, you can start off volunteering somewhere as a starting place to build, number one, your confidence, secondly, your skills and abilities, and also your resume, and have some control from the place of self-employed. So I won't talk about that too much, because I'm going to create a whole nother series about self-employment and MS. So for now, we'll just put that on hold. So let's fast forward to the point where you've got your portfolio together and you're ready for the next step of your plan.
Yeah, so the next step of my plan really was to, in many ways, start a podcast. Now that was like, that kind of went totally against my personality at the time, because I was a very unconfident, shy kind of person. Like, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you on a video chat right now. Like, if I had this opportunity 6 years ago, I'd be like, oh my gosh, no, I can't do that. That's way too scary. Yeah, that was kind of the natural progression, I think. So with the blogs and things that I did, I was encouraged a lot of the time to draw an illustration to go alongside it, to kind of illustrate the point of the blog that I was trying to make, really, which I was really scared to do at first, to be quite honest, because I thought, you know, I could lose my hand at any time. Like, it's happened before, and I didn't know that that could happen, and now it's happened.
Was this in a volunteer capacity that you were drawing?
Yeah, it was, to start off with.
Wow. So that gave you the confidence not only to write the blogs, but also to get back into the habit of doing illustration, a lower risk opportunity, or a lower risk situation, because you were volunteering, right?
Yeah.
Even though the fear inside might be there, the stakes weren't high in terms of, you know, what you could lose from that.
No, that's totally right. I mean, because I was doing it for almost just to kind of go along with the blog and make the person's life easier who was editing the blog, really, because they wouldn't have to go and find an image or anything like that, because it would be sourced there with them.
Tell us the story about how you went from the volunteer to pivoting to getting paid.
The one thing that really helped me was right at the start of my story. Now, I want to kind of get this kind of timeline clear. So right at the start of the story, the first company that I ever reached out to was the National MS Society. And the reason that I did that was because I thought they were the biggest one out of everybody. Like they kind of trump everything. And I thought, if I could get in with that one, then the rest should be easier to get into. So that was actually a much harder journey than I expected, if I'm quite honest. So when I first reached out to them, I think it took like an email a day for about 3 months. And it was just 3 months of them going, yeah, no, we don't want that.
Every day, you emailed them every day.
I emailed them every day. Yeah,
wow, that is tenacity.
I was committed because, I really wanted to make a change. I really wanted to get my voice out there. And I really felt like I had to share my story I didn't feel like young people were being represented on MS kind of websites at the time. So it was really, really important thing for me. So I was reaching out to this person at the National MS Society. And every day I was messaging her and I was like, look, I've got blog topics. I could talk about what it's like to use a disabled badge at the age of 27 or whatever, when you look fine, but everybody else judges you and things like that. And the whole issue around like getting married and people are pressuring me into having a family and having children. I don't even know if I can have children. And, nobody was talking about these sorts of issues. So that was really, really important to me. And I was reaching out every day.
What point did things change for you?
Yeah, so right at the end of that 3 months, she finally sent me an email back and she was like, fine, I'll send you the email address of the person who runs the blog. I was like, finally, finally, great. So I started to write blogs for them. Now, there was one issue as well that I hadn't actually mentioned, is that I'd never actually written a blog before. So yeah, I had to learn all of that as well. That was interesting. But that was kind of the pivotal sort of moment, is getting that first contract and actually starting to work for the National MS Society, because they did pay me.
What changed for you inside as a result of getting that contract?
I had a why now. I had a purpose back in my life. I realized how strong my story was and how it could actually be so impactful on other people. And that was the thing that made me push through absolutely everything that was holding me back, or what I thought was holding me back in my own head. And sometimes I've learned that you just have to step out of your own way. Like I heard on a business podcast, you could be doing a disservice to people by not doing the thing that you're afraid of. And the other thing that I kind of picked up at the same time was a phrase, which was, how would the person that I want to be do the things that I want to do now? And I thought, well, the person that I want to be is a strong and confident person. They wouldn't care about being worried about reaching out to a big charity. They'd just do it. They'd just go ahead and do it. And I thought, well, I want to be that person. So I'm just going to do that thing that person would do, and hope that it gets like a really good result on the other end. And it totally worked.
It worked because you kept at it. It's easy to feel defeated in life in general. And when you live with a chronic illness like MS and the confidence is low, it's easy to give up. This is an important message, is to know that keep at what is your why. Because when you do that, things happen. It doesn't necessarily happen easily. I'm building my YouTube channel. It's taken a while, it's taking time. I'm sticking with it, because when I get a comment from somebody and they're expressing that they resonate, or that what they're watching, the video they're watching, is really helping them or validating them, or it's giving them a new perspective, I'm like, yes, I'm going to keep going.
Sure, yeah. So, the podcast came about because I was inspired by another business podcast. I think that's a really important thing to mention. Because I realized the impact of my own story on other people, I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to create a platform for other people to share their stories on?
So, Jessie, how long ago did you start this podcast?
So it was in May 30th last year. So it was around, 9 months now?
And what's it called?
It's called the Disabled to Enabled podcast.
And what was the driving force around when you think about leading change, which is the theme of this series, leading change for MS, and in your case, sort of disability or critical illness. What would you say is your mission?
Yeah, my mission is really to help people with chronic illnesses to feel empowered. It is so important for people with chronic illnesses, especially with invisible illnesses that other people can't see. It's so important that they share their story, because that gives you so much power, I think. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, the only people who are really experts in that condition is the people with the condition themselves. And this is also something that brings me on to kind of my next sort of leg of the business, if you like, is to actually start creating awareness in healthcare professionals about how much a patient can actually benefit from being known as the expert, rather than just being kind of tossed aside like quite a lot of people are, because they're not taken seriously. And that's something that I've really learned from interviewing people on the podcast.
Yeah, we are the experts of our body, right?
Yeah.
As you said for yourself at the beginning of this interview about getting in touch with your body, which you were disconnected from.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so true. I think we were to ask most people living with MS and chronic illnesses, they're way more in tune with their bodies now than they were before.
Oh, yeah.
I know certainly I am, and that we are the experts. And when the medical system tells us what to do, we ultimately have to decide for ourselves, knowing our own body, whether that's a good decision or not. I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I've seen so many things from interviewing people, you know, and I've seen what kind of healthcare it looks like in different countries and in different parts of the world. And it's like all of it has its ups and downs, obviously. It's just something that's missing, and it seems to be missing across a lot of sectors of healthcare, is the fact that patients aren't being recognised as the experts of their own condition. You know, they're not being taken seriously with, I mean, the amount of people that have come on my podcast and said, I've been diagnosed with anxiety just because I'm female and I'm this age, and things like that, when it was actually some really serious condition on the other side. And, you know, I mean, people are going through sort of 10 years of misdiagnosis left, right and centre, and it doesn't need to happen that way.
People need to be heard and trusted for their own knowledge about what's happening, and the medical system doesn't have time to listen. So hopefully that will change over time. Certainly your podcast is going to empower people to share their story and be acknowledged and feel heard. So that's fantastic. If people want to reach out to you, Jessie Ace, what are the best ways for them to do that? And I will post the links below as well.
Awesome. Yeah, with the link to my podcast, I mean, my podcast is all over the place. So it's on every kind of channel that you would expect to go and find a podcast. So just search for Disabled to Enabled. And I make sure to share stories that are positive, and I like to share the stories of people that have kind of taken a diagnosis and then done something incredible with it on the back end. So you can hear from people like radio DJs, you can hear from actresses, you can hear from people who've done 53 marathons with MS. I've got no idea how she did that. She's incredible. And there's just so many amazing people. So definitely go and check that out. It's Disabled to Enabled. So social media, you can search Disabled to Enabled, and you can also join the Facebook group, which is the Enabled Warriors.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today, Jessie Ace. You aced it. And I look forward to interviewing you on the self-employment YouTube interview when I launch that. So you'll be back.
Looking forward to that. I'll be back.
So remember to subscribe so you know what interview is coming next for Leading Change with MS, as well as all the other videos that are on this channel, My Messy House. Like, share, and write your comments. We'll see you soon.